Today we take much scientific knowledge for granted. But actually, they are the results of centuries of interpretations and experiments. For a long time common people, physicians, and even scientists based their theories more on beliefs, rather than on scientific proofs. Those theories might make us laugh today, but at one time they were an integral part of people's life. Keep watching this list to discover 10 crazy things people used to believe in. Cannibal cures. Suffering from persistent headaches, muscle cramps or stomach ulcers? Once upon a time, your local physician may have prescribed an elixir containing human flesh, blood or bone. So-called corpse medicine was a disturbingly common practice for hundreds of years. The Romans believed that the blood of fallen gladiators could cure epilepsy, and 12th century apothecaries were known for keeping a stock of mummy powder, a macabre extract made from ground-up mummies looted from Egypt. Meanwhile, in 17th century England, King Charles II was known for enjoying a draught of King's Drops, a restorative brew made from crumbled human skull and alcohol. These cannibalistic medicines were thought to have magical properties. By consuming the remains of a deceased person, the patient also ingested part of their spirit, leading to increased vitality and well-being. The type of cure prescribed usually corresponded to the type of ailment. Skull was used for migraines, and human fat for muscle aches, but getting fresh stock could be a gruesome process. In some cases, the sickly would even attend executions in the hope of getting a cheap cup of the freshly killed person's blood. God bless you. There are a few different explanations about the origins of God bless you, or in short, bless you. The first dates back to the 1st century, and is deeply rooted in superstition. Back then, a sneeze was sometimes thought to be the body's way of trying to rid itself of evil spirits. So, in that case, saying God bless you was a way to try to provide a protection, or a good luck charm, against the evil spirits leaving or inhabiting the body. Others believe that our hearts stop when we sneeze, so we say God bless you, as thanks to God for surviving. Truth is, the intrathoracic pressure in your body momentarily increases when we sneeze. This will decrease the blood's flow back to the heart, and the heart will compensate for this by altering its normal heart rhythms to momentarily adjust. However, the electrical activity of the heart is not affected during the sneeze. So how else could this phrase have caught on? Well, the Library of Congress lists one other reason for why we might say God bless you. This explanation comes from the plague of Justinian from 541 AD to 542 AD, which was a pandemic that spread across the Eastern Roman Empire. It's said that Pope Gregory I decreed that anytime a sneeze was heard, the sneezers were to be blessed by saying, God bless you, while making the sign of the cross over their mouth as protection against the plague. Traveling by train could cause instant insanity. When train travel was fairly new, somehow the idea took hold that rising on one could cause a man to go insane. There were tales of socially unacceptable behavior, particularly fights and attacks on women. And these made the news, which made the incident seem more prevalent than they were. As the railway grew more popular in the 1850s and 1860s, trains allowed travelers to move about with unprecedented speed and efficiency, cutting the length of travel time drastically. But according to the more fearful Victorians, these technological achievements came at the considerable cost of mental health. As Edwin Fuller Torrey and Judy Miller wrote in The Invisible Plague, the rise of mental illness from 1750 to the present, trains were believed to injure the brain. In particular, the jarring motion of the train was alleged to unhinge the mind, and either drive sane people mad, or trigger violent outbursts from a latent lunatic. Mixed with the noise of the train car, it was believed, shatter nerves. The novel experience made people nervous, which probably sparked some incidents. Train travel also caused people of different classes to be in close proximity, which may have exacerbated anxiety. But over time, people got used to travel, mad railway madness seemed to disappear. Although modern-day riders know that if you ride a commuter train every day, you're going to see some strange behavior even today. Some animals were born on their own. It was once widely accepted that the planet was flat and the sun orbited the Earth. It was also commonly believed you could make a mouse by placing a dirty shirt in a container of wheat. If a soiled shirt is placed in the opening of a vessel containing grains of wheat, the reaction of the leaven in the shirt with fumes from the wheat will, after approximately 21 days, transform the wheat into mice, wrote 17th century Flemish chemist John Baptiste van Helmont. People didn't have an explanation for how maggots materialized on old meat or how mollusks seemed to appear in the sea, so they surmised that such creatures simply arose from inanimate matter. The idea wasn't unique to Europeans like Helmont. The Babylonians, Indians, and Chinese drew similar conclusions based on their own observations. How did other animals supposedly spontaneously generate? Bees were once thought to swarm from the corpses of partially buried dead bulls. Salamanders were born from fire. It's likely that people sitting around fires saw the unfortunate animals, which often hide in logs, crawling out of the flames. Because cities lacked sewage systems and proper waste disposal methods, they threw trash into the streets, which attracted rats, and led people to believe rats were generated from garbage. After observing flooded rivers leaving behind both mud and frogs, it was assumed that wet soil created the amphibians. Babies couldn't feel pain. For years, even as life-saving surgeries became more invasive, longer, and more intense, the majority of newborns still underwent them without anesthetic. Often, they were given nothing more than a muscle relaxant to keep them from thrashing around during the operation. It was the best practice at the time, following the best available science. And it was horrifyingly wrong. Pain, emotional, spiritual, physical, is fundamental to the human experience. Yet we are still struggling mightily to understand it. Pain is unique to the individual, but also, crucially, in the eye of the beholder. It can defy language's ability to convey and science to fully explain, and it's a problem that appears and reappears in issues from the opioid crisis to abortion. Cigarettes cure constipation among pregnant women. Pregnant women experience a lot of discomforts, and the most common is feeling constipated on a regular basis. Yes, you're carrying a life inside you, so you need to power through all the discomforts. However, that doesn't mean they didn't try finding quick fixes for pregnancy problems. About 50 years ago, it was believed that smoking cigarettes alleviated constipation among pregnant women. Doctors even advise their pregnant patients to smoke whenever they are constipated. Maybe it does, but what they failed to consider were the underlying negative health effects smoking does to the mother and the unborn child. When more researches on smoking were done, and proved its negative effects, even to those who aren't pregnant, that was only the time when they stopped recommending it to pregnant women. Today, the most common solution for pregnancy constipation is taking more fiber supplements on a daily basis. Bloodletting. Bloodletting was used for hundreds of years to help cure illness and restore health, and its popularity thrived in the 19th century. Even though its effectiveness was routinely questioned, the procedure was used for cardiac problems into the 1920s. Bloodletting has been employed since ancient times as a method to keep the body's so-called four humors in balance. By the second millennium, the belief in the four humors began to decline, but bloodletting remained popular. Because surgery was still a crude practice, many physicians avoided it. Instead, people turned to the church for medical help. However, in 1163 a church edict by the Council of Tours forbade monks and priests to practice bloodletting. By the 1870s, bloodletting was so popular among patients that, although medical use of the practice was declining, many patients had to be convinced not to be bled when they fell ill. Blowing smoke up one's arse. When we think about tobacco, we generally think of people inhaling its smoke via a pipe or cigarette or chewing on its leaves. Both processes deliver the chemical nicotine, among thousands of others, into the bloodstream, either via the lungs or through absorption in the gum of a tobacco chewer's mouth. Once in the bloodstream, nicotine easily reaches the brain. Mechanically speaking, the insertion of tobacco smoke into the rectum, which has a large number of blood vessels, would accomplish a similar end goal, the delivery of nicotine to the bloodstream. Once upon a time in 1774 two London doctors, William Hawes and Thomas Cogan, founded the institution for affording immediate relief to persons apparently dead from drowning. These sorts of humane societies for the nearly drowned and dead were popular in these times, with similar chapters throughout Europe. But what set the good doctors Hawes and Cogan apart from the rest was their unique sense of style, the tobacco smoke enema. When an apparently dead from drowning person was pulled from the Thames, it was thought that two things needed to happen to successfully resuscitate them: warming of the body and stimulation. Tobacco was becoming popular in Europe thanks to its exportation from the Americas, and a well-known stimulant thanks to the alkaloid nicotine. The nearly dead drowning victim can't smoke themselves, and certainly can't swallow anything. And since hypodermic needles weren't to be fully invented for another 100 years, the only logical way to administer tobacco was rectally. Plus, the warm smoke would warm the individual from the inside. Win-win. Thus, the tobacco smoke enema was born, and devices placed all along the Thames River. Tobacco smoke enemas became very much in vogue, and were used to treat everything from headaches to cholera. So the next time you have a headache, cold, or flu, ask your doctor about a tobacco smoke enema. Let us know how it turns out. The medical practice of blowing tobacco smoke into a person's butt fell out of favor when, in 1811, nicotine was discovered by English scientist Ben Brodie to be toxic to the heart. Doctors didn't need to wash their hands. Prior to 1860s, doctors did not wash their hands before attending to patients, and the doctor that proposed medical professionals should wash their hands before handling patients was so mocked by his peers that he suffered from a nervous breakdown. In 1865, a Hungarian physician, Ignaz Philipp Semmelweis, was committed to an asylum as he suffered a nervous breakdown. The reason, he suggested, that doctors should wash their hands after examining a patient. In those times, the germ theory of disease was not widely accepted. Hence, doctors didn't wash their hands after performing an autopsy, and even after examining a patient. The bed linens and laboratory coats were not washed. Surgical instruments were cleaned only when they were put away for storage. Also, in those times, it was a common notion that a gentleman's hands are always clean. Since doctors were gentlemen, they refrained from washing their hands. So, when Semmelweis suggested that doctors should wash their hands, he was mocked and ridiculed. After his death, the germ theory came into existence, and by 1875, scrubbing of hands and sterilization of instruments were widely practiced. Ice pick lobotomies were a great medical option. Psychiatrist Walter Freeman thought he came across a life-changing medical procedure when he did his first ice pick lobotomy in 1946. Ice pick wasn't just some cute name for the lobotomy. He used a metal rod just like an ice pick and jammed it through your eye socket into your brain while you were still awake. Freeman figured that depression or mood problems were caused by too much emotion, so he wanted to cut the emotional connection in the brain, literally. People did tend to be much calmer or changed after the procedure, though some were left paralyzed or mentally disabled. Freeman crossed the country, performing lobotomies publicly like a traveling freak show, sometimes doing 2 people at a time, an ice pick in each hand. The treatment caught on because there were so few resources available for the mentally ill at the time. Hearing of this new way to calm unruly people, Howard Doley's stepmother brought him in to see Dr. Freeman. The stepmother claimed the child had a variety of mood and behavior problems, but in truth, Doley was just an average kid. The stepmother hated him and wanted to do anything to make the child as sedate as possible. So Freeman agreed to perform the lobotomy. Doley was only 12 years old, and they didn't bother to tell the father that his son would be getting the ice pick special. But operating on a 12-year-old without full parental consent wasn't what brought Freeman down. In 1967, he performed a lobotomy on a housewife who later died of a brain hemorrhage. Finally, people figured out that shoving a knife in your brain may not be an advanced medical technique. Which of the things mentioned in this video amazed you the most? Tell us in the comments section below.